hold on one.
Do you want me to leave?
Just,
Okay.
it's thinking right now.
Hello. We've started that.
Okay.
All right, it is 5:03, and I'm going to be calling the finance meeting to order. And the first line of business is the transportation contract. We have Brant buses here. I'm sorry, I forgot the name already.
Steve Reckley.
Steve Reckley. Mr. Reckley, would you care to speak?
Yeah, I can just give an intro and
Okay,
I of course want him to fill in. The district annually brings the transportation contract to the board, first with the finance committee and then for full approval with the board. It is, and we meet with Steve, a week or so, we met to discuss the needs and kind of, challenges that they've been facing and talk about service over the year. And we're so grateful for Brant buses. We are without you guys, we'd be lost. We couldn't run our schools. So thank you so much for all that you do. So, outlined in the memo was the increased cost proposals, and I can let Steve talk a little bit more to that. I mean, we all know that inflation costs of everything is just astronomically high, and we discussed just prices based on what would be reasonable within that, considering the challenges that they face. So something else I was going to mention. The kind of unique thing about transportation contracts when I went into school finance learn is that they sort of always kind of have a rolling renewal of 5 years. That's very standard because that gives it just kind of like a, I don't know how to say, like a best practice and standard across the state. If I'm not saying that correct, feel free to correct me on that. So I'll turn it over to Steve for anything else you'd like to add.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, for those that don't know, Brant buses has had the contract since 1974. So it's quite a long time. We're very happy and had a really good relationship with the Manitowoc Public School District for that length of time. I guess the reason she probably brought me in this year is because it's a little unusual in that our increase, which normally is less than 3%, is a little higher than that, which is at 7.5%. And I'm sure most of you are aware of the business economy that we have entered into. One example for us is we started this calendar year hiring drivers, CDL quality drivers, that have to pass a background check, physical, drug testing for $13.75 an hour. I only ask for what I think we need to hire good quality drivers. And at that point last year, I felt very comfortable going into the year with that. However, in that short year's time, wages have just gone through the roof. I mean, right away, Northern Labs went up $4 an hour. McDonald's is paying $15 an hour to start for any employer. So we needed to adjust dramatically our wages to maintain good drivers and just to get quality drivers to come and apply for the position. So I looked around, I'm on the Wisconsin School Bus Association Board of Directors, which, deals with Lamers and Right Way and all the big guys, Coulson. So I inquire with them, as far as what they're doing, as far as pay. We're always lower than what other districts are. It's not the quality of our drivers, it's that I think we do a good job maintaining our drivers and recruiting good drivers, and so we just haven't had to pay them a higher rate. And I think in the valley, they're at $22 to $25 an hour. And even on the outskirts, I know Michigan is over $22 an hour when they pay for their routes. However, I felt comfortable at $16.50. If we could go from $13.75 to $16.50, I could recruit enough quality drivers and maintain the drivers that we have to provide a good job for the Manitowoc Public School District. However, that's a 20% increase on wages when you go from $13.75. So we're asking for 7.5%. The only thing that didn't go up this year for us was our insurance, which is good. For those who deal with parts, I don't know all the backgrounds of individuals, but Matt deals with, lubricants and tires and things like that. We saw about a 30% increase in our tire cost. The urea, or that we use for our diesel engines, that went up 80%. And I don't even know if we're going to be able to get that next year, which could be a big issue for trucks because there's a shortage of that. So our perks costs went up dramatically as well. So that's where we came up with the 7.5% increase. I don't know how specific you want to get into more information. I'm just kind of going over this. We do have a rolling contract. That is something that almost all companies have for school districts, where you have a 5-year contract and it goes down to 4 and then it goes back to 5. Some have a 7-year rolling, some have an 8-year rolling. It really doesn't matter. It's for capital expenses. I mean, buses are about $100,000 each. In order to have quality equipment, you've got to have an investment from the district to make that investment. Otherwise, you just wouldn't invest in new equipment. Anybody have any questions?
I think the other thing too, I just thought to mention as well, was since we have just a younger board, like the special education transportation, that's something that comes out of our special education funding that's separated out. And so depending upon individualized education plans, some have specialized busing needs, or like assisted transport we use at times. So those are kind of that's why that's drawn out separately. The extracurriculars, so that'd be like any athletics, and then just for any other, like would the extracurricular be the same as the field trip costs as well too, correct?
Yep. Additional transportation is for specialized transportation that is outside the routes.
Okay.
And it's so in
field trips and
no. The extracurricular is, let's see, do you have that down here? The additional.
the third goal.
Oh, extracurricular is a third goal, but that includes all sporting events and field trips.
Oh, okay.
The increase in the additional transportation, that is for, we do deal with this, both with the assisted transport and the grant, is there's a lot of homeless that we have to transport, and special needs that are, like, they don't live in the Madison attendance area, they live way out. And so it's kind of outside the scope of our general services. And so there's an additional fee for going outside the scope of that. So that's what that is.
Does anybody have any questions for Steve or Angela?
I just wanted to know the scope of the contract. Does it include the assisted transport and stuff?
No, the assisted transport is a separate contract. It's not a contract. So what happens is, and this is something that a lot of school districts have been dealing with, is the specialized transportation, the IEPs.
Sure.
And that has changed over the years as far as what the districts are required to provide. It's kind of expanded to where it's more specialized. So where we used to reroute buses and things of that nature, it's gotten to the point where on the IEPs they're requesting vehicle transportation individualized for certain students to meet their requirements. In addition, the time schedules are different for sometimes they 9 to 3, and then they move it back to a half hour. Well, to put that on a route, that's very difficult. So that's where the assisted transport comes in, which is also our company.
That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, it's correct. Yeah, it's the same company. It's
But
just
it's not
utilize the vans, but it's not in this contract. Correct. I'm sorry. Yep.
Yeah. So I know sometimes you'll see they're separated out too.
If there isn't, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm curious, so you guys are local, right?
Yes.
And you guys have been working with the district for,
Since 1974.
oh, wow, okay.
Yep.
Well,
There's only been 3 owners. We had Bob Brandt, who started in 1974, and Rick Wolf then was the owner, and then I took over. So
cool. Yeah, it sounds like you guys are doing a good job for us. I'm curious, Angela, and we, not to say that you guys aren't doing a good job, but just to make sure we're doing our due diligence, have we seen competitive bids for the service at all? Or do you guys normally do that?
I'm not sure when the last time the district did that. I want to say maybe like 5 to 10 years ago they talked about. I mean, we haven't go on to competitive bid on this simply because when you do a quick comparison, we would, if let's say we would hire a bus company from Green Bay, you would pay all of additional mileage from Green Bay to even like get on in our attendance area to start the routes. And so just the, like, while they're paying like larger hourly rates, overall, you would have that added cost of fuel and wear and tear on the vehicles as well. So, so we have not.
Yeah, we had this very conversation last year, and that was one of the very questions we asked. And it was, I think Mark was here at the time, because I remember Mark really explaining it too, and explaining like having a grant here is awesome for us, that not many places have a bus company right there, because the added cost to go outside of our district would be astronomical. So,
It's becoming less and less of an option.
yeah, we had a bit of a comparison somehow from Mark last year. He gave us some examples. I don't think we saw contracts, but that was one of the questions, and he did answer it, and it was really obvious that we should just continue bringing it.
If at any time you guys would want us just to get a comparison to see, you know, just to rest at ease to say like, okay, you know, this is what, you know, in future years, we'd be happy to do that.
I think, you know, again, I don't know a whole lot about the bus business, but, you know, I don't doubt that you're, you know, the environment, I know what it is, I'm in business myself. I just think just given the magnitude of the dollars, I mean, it's over $1 million a year spent. I think we should at least just make sure the markets hasn't changed a whole lot. Not that I doubt it, but, you know, again,
Just doing diligence.
it's like a $1.4 million a year spend. I mean, it's significant.
Stacy?
What, I have two questions. One is, what other districts do you do?
We just do the Manitowoc Public School District,
Okay, so who does Two Rivers use?
Two Rivers buses.
Okay, so that would be an option for us, would be Two Rivers. We wouldn't have to get them from Green Bay.
Correct.
Okay, what about who's Mishicot use?
Their own, their in-house.
They've all, you know, I think I could say pretty safely, they're all struggling to maintain their own routes. Their Valders also has their own busing too.
Okay.
So, yes, I mean, if you would like me to, just even for, I mean, I don't know if you want me to have them vote out for this year, or just say like next year you want us to go out to bid officially for something like that. I mean, whatever the board would like me to do.
Okay, how that would work, just so you know, you would have to run our contract down to 0 in order to bid it out. So we have a 5-year rolling contract. You would just have to say, for 5 years, you know, we're not going to renew your contract, and then you would put it up to bid. That's how the.
We do market analysis though, at least.
You could do easily
Yes,
market
yeah.
analysis, and I would welcome that.
And that was my other question. I mean, this whole 1 year, every year seems very goofy to me. So what you're saying is if we didn't renew this, if we would still do our contract all the way down to
5 years.
2026.
Yeah.
It says 2022 to 2027, right?
That would be like, this is the renewal contract, and then we have a 21, 26 one in force at this time.
Okay, so that would just stay.
My only question would be, that I think our contract is where it has to be because of the volatile market. What I would like to ask you, sir, is how could we optimize the billing of assisted transport, so maybe we could not use the buses when we don't need to, or we can save money on the assisted transport, because I see that being the real, how we're getting we're wasting a lot of, not wasting, but we're utilizing a lot of funds. If we could optimize, do you have any information or suggestions how we could optimize that side of it? Because that's how I feel that we're really kind of spending a lot.
Yes. So what we do in that situation, we work real closely with Joanne on this, is if we can, it's more expensive to use the buses than it is for the assisted transport. So when we can utilize the buses, we do. When it's a cheaper option to use the assisted transport, we'll go to her and say, hey, listen, you know, we can do it with the assist rather than the bus, you know, so she always knows. The problem we're running into with the assisted transport, or what you're talking about costs, are the Homeless Act, which started about 7 years ago, and that has killed budgets all over the place, because if you look at that, you have to provide transportation. Let's just say, okay, so for example, we just got a request, the school district got a request for a homeless family that now resides in Sheboygan. So for the last 3 weeks of school, we have to provide transportation to that person in Sheboygan. In addition, let's just say, and we've had that for Sheboygan, Green Bay, we've transported all over the place. In fact, we almost had one that we had to transport to Appleton. If they were residing in the Manitowoc Public School District at the beginning of the school year, and they lost their house and moved to wherever in the state of Wisconsin, they could require the Manitowoc Public School District by law to provide transportation for the entire year, even if they got housing. That's the law. So this is where your costs are coming from, is homeless and the increase in IEPs. So it's an excellent question, and it's an increase in every single school district's budget. And when I go to conventions and I talk to the other school bus companies, I say, okay, this is, going up and up and up, and it's just part of the IEPs. It is the requirement of the Manitowoc Public School District to provide that specialized plan for these children, and whatever it is what you have to provide.
So, how many people do you have that are in this, that utilize
Homeless?
that?
20, 25, 30?
That are going beyond our county?
Oh, beyond the county. Right, this year, we had 2 families in Sheboygan, none in Green Bay this year, but then they eventually stopped wanting to go. And that transportation, we had, the one family had 3 kids, one that went to elementary school, one that went to middle school and high school. So we had to, we're not gonna send 2 vehicles down there, but technically if they would have required it, we would have had to, the school district would have had to provide that. So we worked it out with the schools where we dropped them off early, but then that cost was to the schools because they have to provide an aide to watch these kids while, so it gets to be a mess. So this year right now, we're just doing the Sheboygan, but in town, it's just as bad. There's, we've got kids that are housed right now on foster kids are another one. So we've got foster kids that are down on Center Road that attend school at Jackson. So, it doesn't fit any of these roads, but you have to provide this transportation. And 7 years ago, you didn't have to do any of that. It was just on their own.
Is it considered incidental transportation at that point or no?
I don't know what you mean by incidental, like
The term.
it's required.
Okay.
It's required. It's something that the Manitowoc School District has to provide by law. So there's not an option to that.
So see, in my view, guys, like the fact that you're only asking 7.5%, I think is amazing given the current climate that we're in with increases in everywhere. Just look at our gas alone, just that alone. Look at what we had to do for our aides. We had to increase pay. It's just everywhere. So I wholly support renewing the contract for that year. I actually dislike very much that you have to come to us every year. That we have to have these same kinds of conversations over and over again. But I know that's just the way it goes, I guess. So I would be fully in support personally of renewing.
Motion.
I would make that motion, yeah.
Okay, is there a second?
I'm not, can I make a motion? Yeah, I think so. I'm not on the committee.
Has to be the committee.
Yeah.
I don't disagree with anything you're saying. I guess I just don't know enough about the history. I'd love to take your word for it, but I gotta do my due diligence and, it's a big spend, so I'll probably end up agreeing with that. I just need to, it's a big spend. I just wanna make sure we're being.
Is there a timeline that's associated to this contract that this needs to be completed by?
We bring it usually in June to the board is what we've done in prior years, so we're a little early on it. I mean, the first, we have it, tentatively slated for the June 14th agenda, and so we wouldn't have another, if you'd like, we just bring up comparable rates to help you see where we would be at compared to other.
Yep.
It would
I think if you can do that, just show me that you've done your homework and diligence, that's all I wanna know. So I'm not questioning, Steve, your background, and
Totally
I just wanna
understand.
make sure I'm doing my
I
job.
have no issue with that.
So,
And I'd rather stick with the local guy anyway, I just wanna make sure.
It's a real symbiotic relationship.
so then with that being said, we have a motion, a request to look further into.
You don't have a second though.
We need a second. Would you be,
Could I do a second, like, contingent on that other,
I mean, it still has to go, either way, it's still gonna have to go to the board
yeah,
for approval, you know, in full. So you can bring it out of committee. And then at the next board meeting, we could do that, where, you know, hopefully by then, we would be, you know, you would have that, and then at that, you get the opportunity to vote on it again.
But we have oh, sorry.
Well, you would have the opportunity then to, if you are presented what you feel is favorable, then you vote on it then again. Or if you don't feel it's favorable, speak to your displeasure, and then there you go. The biggest reason that we have things in committee though is you do the groundwork on some of these items in committee, that way then it you know, keeps the meeting moving more expedient, as Casey is all for, right?
I understand, yeah. You know,
It's up to you if that's how you would want to proceed though. Otherwise, we can always table till the next finance committee meeting, which is coming up on the 25th.
Yeah, I guess I'd rather not slow down the process. I just feel like I'd like to have more information before I stamp it, you know.
Sure.
But I guess let's play this out here. I mean, I could second it today, and it still has to get approval from the board.
Correct.
So if between now and then, you know, we get information that may not be favorable, we could always change it then, right?
Correct. You're not doing a full approval
Second,
in committee.
second.
Okay. So they'll do we have Tony seconding. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. So then, Angela, then if we could, any information that would be beneficial to the general meeting when it's brought forward, and maybe even just put it out to committee. That way then, or put it out to the board then, so that way then the board can move
Take the
forward.
memorandum, the contract, and then the comparables.
We're meeting next week again on the 25th, right?
Yes.
So if we have that before the 25th and we decide not to, we'll know
Oh,
by.
the-
next
Right.
week.
Today's
And
the
that's-
25th, so
Or,
the 15th of June. was-
15th of June, sorry, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, I moved up here. Okay.
Yeah.
That's also 15.
So many meetings, they start to blend, don't
They
they?
are,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
kind of a lot.
So, well, thank you so much. We are so
Yeah,
grateful for all that
thank
you
you.
do for us.
Thank you
So
for your
thank
time.
for
Nice to meet you guys.
So,
Wish you the best. That's a tough position. I read about meetings all the time. Hope it calms down for you guys.
Yeah. Jump in sometime, yeah.
Yeah, no thanks.
Thank you.
I like to look from afar. Have a good night, thanks.
Good night.
Okay.
All right, the next item on the agenda is the purchasing policy. Angela, if you would like to touch on what we have here?
Sure, and I do have some updates too. So, what I was able to obtain and provide, I have some extra copies too, if anyone would like to see it, or actually for this, I just have my copy, but I was able to get the template. So this is for all policies in Neola. There is a template that is used to, you know, make revisions and take consideration into certain things in the legal counsel. You know, they use different legal, our attorneys will review the drafts and make suggestions to updates to the templates over time that many districts use. So compared to, I found it interesting, Kim Mishler, former business manager from the district, and I were taking a look at this the other day, and we found that there were a couple of things that were updates on here. So for example, on page 2, there were some things regarding under the general provisions, you know, just different choices that we could add to the contract. So one of the things that Ken was business manager in the school district for 27 years, so I really believe he's like beyond a plethora of information, well regarded around the state. And one thing we just kept coming to the conclusion of when we looked at this is that though it discusses services, a lot of the language within the policy addresses mainly tangible items, which is a challenge, okay? So it just was not sitting right with me. The last couple of days, I was like, oh gosh, I just don't, I'm just like, I totally 100% understand your desire for transparency. We want to be transparent, it's not a question, but it's just the ability to keep business going. So I think with the $100,000 limits, if I can just share some of my thoughts, and then of course, I want to turn it over and not talk so much, but the bids, is the piece where that's just, a bidding process is very formal, okay? And so that level can come down, but that would definitely add to staff time, just general work power and the motion of business, so that's just something that the board needs to consider. There are some provisions in here where you can say where something, where it says like under the general provisions, there's the additional contract language, and it could be, any of the amounts can be adjusted within here. And you can see even specifically for, like what you would want to specifically be advised on prior to approval, like if things, vary by a percentage or materially from the function or scope of what was budgeted. So there's a lot of flexibility in it, I guess is what I'm saying. But what I found out today, I was talking to a business manager in McWanago about something else, and I was like, hey, what is your purchasing policy? What do you guys use? Business managers talk to each other a lot. And they had just different language in their policy. I brought copies of it along if we wanted to take a look at it or if you guys wanted to see it. So I apologize it wasn't posted in board book. So, we have these options here, but they did a lot of the same things, but then they also talked about, I'm just saying on this out. On the second page specifically, what I thought was something that would be more workable was in the contracted services point B.
Angela, I can handle something.
Yeah, oh, okay, thank you. I'll let this one, and you can, thank you. So I guess the biggest question, like computers is a great example. Like when we buy computers, those are going to be over $50,000 easily. We always collect, because they're over $3,000 for anything technology related, we pretty much collect 3 bids just because of the level and the volume of the purchases and stuff like that. Books, like Follett, when we order books, sometimes we'll order $30,000 worth of books, at a time. So then, it's just kind of, we just want to keep business going. So those are some of the things to consider. So I just wanted to, I realized that, there's a need for some revisions to this policy. One suggestion that Kenneth had is instead of moving the bottom number up from 3,000 to 10 or 7 to $5,000, and that's similar in a lot of policies. So,
Bids, right?
Huh?
That's the bid number?
That's the quote number. That's the lower one. So we talked about 7 the other time, but he said maybe think about doing just 5,000 because it's just a little higher from 3,000. So I thought that was a good suggestion. And I just worry about the competitive bids because it's more of like a, doing an RFP. You have to do like a formal proposal, then send those out the bids, and then have the bid opening and that. We just.
Why does it have to be that way?
It doesn't have to be that way. Like, or you mean the bid process itself?
Yeah, why can't it just be giving you 3 quotes and then not do all the other stuff you said?
Well, in the McWanago one, or the other example that I provided, they do not have an upper threshold where they require bids. So if you look on this one, and I did like this as well, it was under the contracted services, it says the board reserves the right to negotiate with individual contractors for services as an alternate to bidding in the best interest of the district. So for example, transportation, legal services, architects, auditors. So I thought that was I really liked the language that they used in here. I think it's just worth taking a little bit of time to look at this and perhaps even more options, as I can certainly keep digging. Yeah, so I know that the main piece is communication and knowing about new things, new initiatives, new ideas, and having that come through. So I'm just trying to differentiate I'm hoping we can differentiate when we finalize the changes between what's new, and I just want to make sure that we're able to keep things going. So if we set the threshold too low, then it's a lot of extra work. I'll do whatever we need to do, so.
So then with that, the contracted services portion, the board has the right to negotiate with individual contractors for services. So say in the instance when we're meeting with, like, we just met with Brand Buses, is that implying then that we participate in the negotiation processes of their contracts?
I kind of wondered about that, to be honest, because I was kind of like, usually, I don't think what he kind of alluded to in the discussions when we were talking about it, that if you look under bids and contracted services, the use of bids and quotations shall be used as a means to assure the district is receiving the best possible price for goods and purchase services. And it goes on to discuss the director of business services role. And then, the director of business services may authorize a direct or negotiated purchase of goods or services, whether in his or her judgment. And basically make the call of whether it's in the best judgment of the district. So they have a looser policy with the wording. So that's where you guys gotta find where you want it in. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's,
Well, the reason that I don't like that is, I mean, there will come a time that all of us are not on this board.
Mhm.
When that time comes, whoever is in these seats, if they're not familiar with, bid processes and all those other things, we don't have legal representation. So there are a lot of legals to doing bids.
It's a
And
very
that
formal process, yes.
can be very liable in the instance of, what we open ourselves up to if we have the board participating in the negotiations of a bid contract.
Yeah, and that's usually handed off to the district,
Right.
and that's where, like, you guys typically don't, that only by law, the only thing that you're required to go out to bid for right now is food service. So like I was gonna share the food service contract with you guys the next meeting when we talk about other food service matters, and we're within a 5-year contract on that now. So, so that's where, I didn't like that wording as well, I agree. But I think something like that, I think I think there are a lot of really good ideas in this example that we could look a little further at. I mean, I know we're eager to get things to where we want them to be, but it's not sitting right with me to rush into it at this time.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if it would be possible for, like, perhaps Colin, you and I to sit and look and draft up.
Matt, did you have
Or others.
something?
I mean, I can try to clarify the processes and how different they are, if anybody wants me to do. I don't know how familiar you are.
What insight you got? Yeah.
So
let's hear
the
it.
bidding process, like, for example, the Russie, we have a 5-year contract with them, and if we would like to run that contract out, so tonight we just kind of gave them a tentative approval of extension of 1 year, but it's a 5-year arm of a contract. So if we would, hypothetically, if we wanted to try to find a different transport company, we would tell him, no, we're not gonna renew your contract for another year. Then we have the 5 years for him to make changes and for us to look for a different, and then after that 5 years, it would be open to bid. So then we would receive bids from different companies, competitive companies. And at that point, then we would get it received to a board, and then we can make a decision on a contract that we would like to go forward with. And that would be a bid that we would receive from different contractors of bus services, okay? So the bidding process is when we have projects that we need to get done, we would put it out to bid so that people or companies would provide estimates, or their price would be what they would be offering for services. And then as a district, we could make that decision. So that's what a bid would be, and then bids are attached to contracts. Now, when we're talking of just like, quotations or general things, that's kind of, I think, what the spirit of what you're trying to provide transparency to. It would be that we want the control of the board to limit on the purchases that are done by, the superintendent, or, I don't really know what we're trying to get at yet, but I think it wouldn't be with the bid, it would be before it gets to bid level. So like, I don't know what our district policy is for bid level right now.
So right now it's $100,000.
Okay, so, sorry, I just want, so
Okay, yeah,
now
sure.
as a district, if there's an expense over 100,000, then we would open up to bid. That's a good number, to be honest, in my opinion, of that we need to get something done. So say if we wanted to buy a new tractor, if it was over 100,000, then we would open it up to bid. But now, like, if you want to have more transparency, maybe you lower that amount to 50, but then it's gonna be a little more cumbersome, but there'll be more competition. But then the directors of the departments wouldn't be able to make decisions under 100, at 100,000. So that's where we would provide the bid process. The bid process is very cumbersome and slow, but it does provide transparency for competitors. But if you have directors that are transparent about them doing their due diligence, about providing estimates to us, and then if they would present that to the board, then you could forego the bid process if they were transparent about, they got estimates for books, and there was 3 different suppliers, and one of them came in A, B, and C, So I think the bid process is important, but maybe we're kind of looking for transparency at the purchasing level more so, not the bid process.
So then with that being said, 100,000 is our cap for
Bids.
tangible items.
Yeah.
Non-tangible items, such as services, are supposed to be brought before the board if above our $3,000 threshold. Is that the interpretation we're seeing?
Well, and yes, and thank you very much for the background too, with, the difference between the bids and the quotes. I mean, it's complicated, like a bid too, like if I do an RFP for audit services, and even though that's not over $100,000, you would say, this is the exact work I want you to quote out on. Like you're very, very, it's much more fine tuned, where if I'm gonna buy, when I was a teacher, we quote out on violins, okay? So I would get 3 quotes on violins from 3 different dealers. They're maybe not gonna give me all Yamaha, they're maybe gonna give me different brands, but they're gonna be 3 quotes, so.
But you were still under the district policy of bids
Correct.
requirements, so that's just a teacher doing due diligence or
Yeah.
a director doing due diligence to try to make sure they're getting apples to apples, or they're trying, I'll stop talking about that, but there's different ways to maneuver around that as well. But I mean, what we're looking for, I think, as a district, is we're trying to provide transparency that are untangible. We could do both. We could lower them. We could lower both of them. But what are we, in what spirit are we trying to attack?
Well, I guess the question too, is it for new initiatives too? That's one way to approach it as well. Like if it's something that's already been in practice. So like we already buy Chromebooks, okay? So the next time we purchase Chromebooks, do we need to come and bring that to the board and to the finance committee? Or is it kind of like, okay, this is already standard practice, there hasn't been concerns about this, so we are going to, we want this really just for new major endeavors, and you could say, like, we could look at that contracted services provision and say, we're gonna, rewrite it to work for us, let's say, and say like any new, before a contract is initiated, or if a contract over the value of this is initiated, it needs to be brought before the board.
Yeah, I think any transparency, if we lower those numbers, they're gonna provide more transparency, because if we're trying to look for discrepancies of why we bought just Chromebooks and not why didn't we look at other ones, or we were kind of, what happens is we get pigeonholed into certain ones, so we have to buy them that way because we're kind of tied into the whole network of things. But I mean, if we just lower it, then it's gonna provide more transparency to the board members no matter what. In all honesty.
And just being frank, that's kind of what I'm wanting. I would prefer more. And then at the same time, having 100, to me, I would actually respectfully disagree that 100,000.
For like buildings and grounds stuff, I would like it to be like 10, because you can attract a lawnmower cost 10 grand now.
Right.
So if it was approved through the board that this is where we're gonna spend our money, then the board, the district stakeholders are actually in power of making the purchases, not the director.
Well, and then it also has to be like specific directors, say, the athletic director buying a line, a field painter. Should that maybe be on buildings and grounds? Things like that, where we have expenses that are sometimes going outside of the lanes, in my opinion. But I think that having that cap of $100,000 does provide new optics to our overall expenses, that we also are aware of how our budget, how our district operates. And then when it comes time for to do the budget, to tackle those things, we already have an understanding, maybe areas that are a little bit fluffier than others.
I think, if you won't mind me asking, I think we could do it through the purchasing, not through the bid one, because then if we lower the purchasing amount, which is it 3,000 right now?
3,000 right now,
And you wanted it to be higher.
to 5,000. I mean, a lot of districts do 10,000, but I mean,
I think Matt, you're onto something with purchasing, because again, I think we're also talking about a communication issue. Because, for instance, one of the things that's come up that I only found out about in finance was the amount that we've spent on professional development towards discipline. I think we're right now, I'm bringing this up, at $175,000 on something that I don't know that the board and the ad hoc committee
What categories?
thought that might have been the best use of that 175.
Right.
Or DeRoot is another good example, right? That wasn't and that I believe came under professional development probably as well. So it's more about what our money is being spent on, rather than, to me, the bidding process. And I don't know where that falls, because again, I don't think that there's got to be a balance, and some solution that where we're not micromanaging professional development, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's not what I want to do. But when we're spending that kind of money towards something that, when I think about all the stuff that needs to happen with discipline, maybe $175,000 probably could have gone towards personnel that we need in the building to help some of the initiatives. I don't know that it was necessarily on a couple of the other training. So that's where I come from. It's sort of like when I see that report of what we've spent the money on, where does that get approved? And I think, Angela, you were kind of telling me that they, whatever the department is, brings you a request for something that has to be approved.
Yes.
Correct? And what do you base your approval on for that request?
So when it's the requisition process is what, really that boils down to. So like our salary, for our whole budget, if you think about like our salaries and benefits, that doesn't go through a requisition process, because that's in place based on just what's approved for salaries, and that payroll doesn't come through that process. But anything else comes through the requisition process, and they have to enter a description and quantity, that kind of stuff, and then the Woofer code goes into that. And so that's the coding that you'll see on the payment of vouchers. So when it comes to my office, throughout a week, I'll get between 50 and 100 of requests that I have to cycle through. So, it's a lot. And, really, after the requisition's approved, it becomes like a contract, and it becomes a PO. And it's a simple contract from the standpoint of a company will say, well, we need a PO in order to hold this for you. So that's like an obligation. So like where we think contracts, your purchase order.
Pay for it.
Yeah, we're agreeing to pay for it, we're committed to paying for it, so that's where I look and see, do they have enough money in their budget? So that's where, if they have it in their budget, I don't, we have to put a great deal of trust, when like each individual school has money for supplies, they're gonna think of, they have the autonomy in their building budget to make a decision for the unique needs of their building. So You know, if it violates the policy, if it seems like, hold on, you know, we shouldn't be buying this, I'll question it, you know. It hasn't happened, you know, like maybe once or twice, and I'm like, can you give me more information on that, you know? And so, and there are ways that we've tried to like look at certain aspects of budgets and say like, can we trim this down, or can we take, like taking a zero-based budget approach with our whole budget would be impossible. I mean, it'd be astronomically a time drain. But like if I have my supply budgets at a school and they want to say like, come to me when you need something, I'm not just going to say you have $200 and then you're going to go spend it on whatever you need. You know, so there's an artful approach to it as well. So there are a couple people that enter requisitions. I make a point, I try to by 6:30 each morning to look through requisitions and approve them, so they've got to get sent out to vendors, and that's how it goes. So every day, do I have something that's over 50,000? Definitely not. There are a lot more smaller range type approval of items. So, but I'd have to say that there would just be a lot more approvals and time spent in meetings doing that stuff.
Tony? Yeah, so I'm not, you know, these policies are good and I think we should definitely, you know, be looking at them. But where I would love to see this conversation move towards at some point is, you know, how do we find ways to, you know, save money, right? I guess, so we have a budget, right? And obviously, you know, I'm just representing from my own experience. I have a guy on my team who's responsible for purchasing, and, you know, we evaluate him based on the percentage that he's able to come in below our budget, right? And so I'm just trying to think of, you know, what's the appropriate way that we could, you know, create some sort of environment where, you know, there's an incentive to do that. And, you know, just knowing that we're a lower spending district, right? It sounds like there's costs we can't control, but there's some that we can. And I just want to make sure that we're being wise. And I'm not saying that we're not, but I'm just saying like, let's really, you know, explore every possible avenue on how we could, you know, if we're spending $81 million a year or 89 million, whatever that number is always changing. You know, what are the biggest expenditures we have, and how do we, you know, can we save like 10%? I mean, that'd be huge.
Oh, definitely. And you know, where that's one of the main differences between like a municipal, you know, finance approach, or like, you know, we're not, like our profit margin, you know, we bring in a certain amount based on our enrollment. And so that with that declining, you know, just the measure is different. It's not the same. But yes, we for sure, there are definitely like long-term range ways that we can save money in our budget. So like when we come on the June 15th meeting, our health insurance and in our OPEB, which is the other post-employment benefits, that's always kind of a goofy one. Those are two major areas in our district where, you know, we ultimately definitely want to still offer and to use a retaining tool, you know, and an attracting tool, good benefits to our employees. But there are ways that we can shape them to save money as well. So there are definitely ways that we can do that, but it's not like you can't just change a practice like this, you know, when you change OPEB benefits and when you change health insurance stuff. Right. It takes many years to actually, you know, to realize the savings. It's not an instant type thing, so.
Well, I think we need to start thinking that way, and I would love to see you come up with a plan on how we might be able to do that. And let's just set the bar high. Let's just say 10%, right? You know, maybe that's not realistic, but
yes,
you know, let's get as close as we can, and then just figure out ways to get there. I mean, I think that's really the mindset that I would encourage, and I would love to see.
Do we track expenses at the school level?
Yes.
So is that now, when you talk about zero-based budgeting, you know, you're starting at a 0 point and building your budget from there, right? So like, when we tracking expenses, are those expenses available, or can they be made available to us to see where there are certain things that maybe down the road, hey, we're spending a lot of money on paper. Let's try and figure out a paper policy.
Yes.
That's really micromanaging.
It's not, well, no, it's, all it is just data gathering. You're looking at data. It's not, I'm not saying that it's an example, and that's simply all I'm doing is providing an example. I'm not saying,
Yeah.
but if we're gonna look at, ways to saving money, and especially knowing what's on the horizon,
Mhm.
having as much information as possible is always a good thing, I think, in my opinion.
Yeah, and like right now, our OPEB, for example, in the actuarial study, which is next time here, they take a look at that, and they calculate your liability over time, because you have to consider that as a district. And right now, we have a guaranteed benefits with our OPEB. And when you have a guaranteed benefit, you're at the mercy of the market and how much that benefit is gonna cost down the road, and you don't have no idea how much it's gonna cost, A lot of companies historically, in one of my classes, we were talking about, a company that in the 80s gave like really extravagant OPEB benefits. And then over time, they, like healthcare, didn't realize it was going to balloon and cost as much as it did. So they, companies went bankrupt because of that kind of stuff. So that's where, we can reshift and retool it so we can save money as a district, but it's not an overnight process.
Right.
But definitely working on.
Tony, did you have something to add to that?
Yeah, I was just gonna suggest, I don't wanna micromanage either, but I think we need to start, I wanna empower you to do your job, but I wanna, at the same time, set targets around, hey, let's figure out what's the non-discretionary spend or whatever outside of wages, whatever that we can, that are variable, right? And then let's figure out our top 3 to 4 expenses, and then let's really drill down, right? And let's, figure out a way to reduce that cost. Who are the big players who are we talking to? I mean, we're a pretty big district, right? At number 30 in the state, I understand. I mean, we got a lot of money to throw around. And I just want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to really stretch that dollar as far as we can, knowing that, the times that we're living in, and, and again, I just, as I'm learning more, maybe you and I can sit down at some point. I know what we want to do, but just to better, understand the process now and how you're doing things. But I really think, for example, like whatever our biggest spend is, like, and I didn't want to put that guy in the spot, and he might be giving us a great deal, right? The bus guy. But, that's a big spend, right? So I just want to know that we've really, have we really shot this?
Have we unpeeled the onion? Have we looked and make sure we?
Let me give you an example, right? In my own business, I have customers I know that are they're going to shop me every freaking time, right? So if you know that's going to happen, and it's super competitive, and they got a lot of options, then you better bring your A game every time. Otherwise, you may not get it, right? And there's others that are kind of like, all right, they'll value different things. And, I'm not saying that we shouldn't value different things, but I'm just saying, knowing the economic reality that we're in, I think that it would be wise to, just make sure that we're getting everyone's best number on the front end. Because, a lot of companies, especially if they get comfortable, they may just, and that could be millions of dollars a year for us, right? So, and I want to work with you to help, find these opportunities. I'm not looking to necessarily cut things, that we need. I'm just looking at how do we get the best value for our dollar, and know that, we're a good district to do business with, right?
Yep. Oh, yeah.
We have a lot of budget, we're spending millions of dollars, and we got to find ways to really stretch those.
Yeah. And really the building budgets, I would say overall, gosh, I want to say, they're definitely, we're always I definitely am looking at ways always to save in what we're spending, so, like our copiers and printers, I can share more in depth too with that. So, if you're doing some things like that, I think because of the size of our district too, we can't just, we can't undo or can't, unpack like 5 different things in 1 year just because of the volume of people that it impacts. Like our copiers and printers, that's taking like over a year to get done. Some of that was mainly supply chain and stuff, but, it just with the volume of work and stuff, but yes, we always are looking at those things, so.
Right. And you agree a couple of things, so that's one of them is
The synergistic, yeah, the synergistic, yeah, the synergistic
But I mean,
program, yeah, synergistic.
But
and-
synergistic is
Yeah,
fun.
those are major endeavors in the last year. We're really proud of the money that we're, today I was talking to Synergistic, and our cost avoidance was $144,000 so far for the last year since we engaged with them. So now the cost of, we had other expenses that came with that, so your total savings is less than that, but we're really working to maximize and trim down and evaluate our operations. So I feel proud of the work that we've done.
Tony, do you know what that is about? Synergistic.
Is that new thing that we're moving to?
No, that's
Skyward.
We're kind of moving off the agenda, so
So
I
yeah,
Yeah, I just want
want
to
to bring
say
it back
money
in.
Yeah.
savings, but it's just synergistic is just a way to manage our properties, so the heating and cooling and so forth, and energy sources to the best that we can. So for example, if a class leaves a classroom, the lights go out, you know what I mean, or they're automatic, or the temperature goes down
Yeah.
or up based on what's needed there, so that we have cost savings.
So
So we are really good about looking into these things.
I would like to bring it back into the scope of the agenda item.
Yeah.
What I would like to see here, I would like to see at minimum that $100,000 brought to $50,000. And I would like to also see I think that's a good number. The quote number brought to $5,000 on our current policy. I think, if we want to rework some of the process or some of the other suggestions to this as far as purchasing goes. One other suggestion that I would possibly be would be wanting to entertain with the committee and then ultimately with the board is that when a director is leaving, that their spending of their budget is subject to board approval. And the reason for that is it simply is. I mean, it's a great deal of trust that you're placing into those people. And if they've already said that they're no longer going to be here, there should be accountability to the ability to spend. And it just comes into an accountability stance. So those three changes are the biggest thing, the three biggest changes that I would like to see. There are other changes. Let's speak to those. Let's try and stay on to the one for the policy here.
Yeah, just to piggyback on what you just said, it makes a lot of sense to me that we can suspend the ability to spend if someone is leaving. So many times in the business world, when you have an employee leaving, many times they're even walked, things are kind of closed down to them, right? Because you give them great access to do whatever they want. They know they're taking if they're leaving. Yeah. So it kind of makes sense to me that we still want to allow them to perform their job, and yet, as Colin was saying, there needs to be some accountability. And really, here's just an example. We've been talking about behavior committee and what to do with just behavior in general, and Safe and Civil Schools was brought forward, and where Mark could have gone out and purchased that without board approval. And then we would have been, for lack of a better term, stuck with it. I mean, we would have had to have worked with it, whether it's really what we wanted or not. So I think those are the kinds of things that we're looking at preventing in the future. We just don't want to have someone spending on something or bringing something into our district that doesn't necessarily have any accountability over it. So that part really makes sense to me. The numbers part, I guess personally, I don't get into the whole numbers part of it. It's part of why we're a good balance, Tony, because you're such a numbers guy, and I'm really just not. I see it more from the educational. But the what was I saying before? But I also see the other part of this is that, and tell me if I'm wrong on this, okay? But to be really blunt about it, it's about, first of all, trust. And when we have things like our professional development, that we want to make sure that that money, we say money is really about salaries, right? It's the money that's costing us to train these teachers. But it's being spent the way the board kind of strategically looks at it, you know, like that it goes along with our thinking and what we want for the district, and that it's done in the best way possible for our kids and their learning. So like maybe like the whole, like being able to talk to kids, think in a certain way, what do we call it this last time that came, losing my track of
Yes, I know.
the verbal intervention,
Yes,
that was
yes.
it. It's funny that I couldn't think of verbal intervention.
And that's why.
But, you know, like, we want to make sure that that's really what we want as a district, and especially when we're working so hard, right? So, like, I think the board needs to have more communication with what's happening with those kind of funds and how that's being spent. For me personally, and just personally, it's not about the contractual items so much that we put out to bid, like, you know, if we're putting on a new roof, for me, I that's not me.
I wanted to speak to that, because now we're done. So I'll
Yeah,
talk about
so
that.
I that's where I think I come into it more, is like, how are those funds or that teacher time being spent in the best way that's new for our kids and their learning? And again, does it align with what the board sees as our goals and what we want for the district? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Which is not Angela.
Which is not what?
Which is not Angela.
No, but it is when the numbers come in, but I think that's part of where I'm struggling with the numbers game in
Sure.
this,
Yeah.
because I'm looking at it more of a, not a dollar sign, but like, but what's like, we purchase new books, you know, or
Just
if
setting
it's a new
parameters.
textbook.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's about defining what those are, maybe, like what we're okay with and what we're not.
Sure.
The way that we can fix that, because some of you're referring to personnel and making decisions, but the way that the board could give oversight is we could say, and which I might have a policy with this, is when we have a contracted service, so like when we buy books, or when we want to have the group contracts, we could make sure that the limit is, we'll say $20,000, and then if there's anything over that $20,000, the board has to approve it. So like that is how we could insert transparency to our elected officials, because we're elected officials, we're not the board, we're elected officials that are trying to represent our community. So the way that we could attach that is contractual agreements. So when even though it's in the budget approved, like, so the pupil services has a budget and the funds are there, we could have a policy saying that if your department is going to spend over $20,000, it has to be approved through the board. So that would provide, because right now, the director can purchase materials or content or a consulting firm under their own budget money. So that's where we can still attach to it through spending contracts. And because from what I'm hearing, that's the best way that we can. Do we have a policy on that?
Well, in the McQuantico one here, it talks about contracted services, and it says, this is theirs. The board reserves the right to negotiate with individual contractors for services as an alternate to bidding in the best interest of the district.
Yep.
Example, transportation, legal, architects, auditors. Before a contract is initiated or reviewed, the appropriate board committee will review the contract to ensure that it's in the district's best interest and recommend to the board whether to go out for a bid or negotiate a contract. The school board will then make the final determination on which procedure to use on a case-by-case basis.
I like that. Yeah,
But does that?
That doesn't cover POs.
That's or PE, professional development.
Yeah, that doesn't cover like the purchase orders, so like.
But you can write that in there as
You
a.
could
add-
you could
yeah,
add
so
and
any-
subtract.
Any professional development gets written into a purchase order, so what it could
Oh,
be
it
that
does?
it doesn't get put into a purchase order, so like the CISA 7 contract, okay? There's Head Start, which is $300,000, there's, you know, that's a big one that we do annually. What I do to give to my purchaser, like she shops for competitive prices all the time too, Tony, I forgot to mention that, you know, she's awesome. Joyce Sedman does a wonderful job with that. And Sandy Bussey does the technology. I mean, they're always like, that's their job. Like, they look for good prices all the time and look and shop around for things. So, but I think that when they, like, let's say Skyward, when you guys approved that, then I gave it to Joyce and I said, okay, put this in as a requisition, and then I approved it. You know, so it already went through that process. So I don't know if that helps.
It does. But the community wants oversight, though, to see that if our directors are making purchases, we should put a threshold on it so that the board is notified about purchases, because obviously there's been some issues with the community not agreeing with purchases that our district has made. So if we put a stopgap in to provide transparency, I think that, so what I'm saying is if we hit a spending limit for contractual, so when a contractual service means anything, or like, or any kind of purchase, so that's where we're, like, you can have curriculum, you can purchase curriculum, and is that a purchase, or is that a PO, or is that a contract? It all depends how they word it, so that's where they can maneuver around things. So if we could just get in policy that if we're spending over, X amount of dollars, it would be provided to the board.
So I guess we've had some pretty healthy discussion, pretty healthy debate on the matter. This is an actionable item. Does anybody have a motion that they would like to put forward to address the things that we have just spoken about? Whether it be numbers included, spending abilities removed after stating they're going to be leaving the district, or quotes, or even the purchasing practices. Does anybody have a motion?
I'd like to see this carry forward to the next meeting for more discussion.
Well,
What do you think?
no. Well, I mean, personally, I especially want the employee spending ability removed
Oh, because of our timing. Right?
because of timing,
I
yes.
understand that.
So I'm going to make a motion then
Okay.
that the employee spending ability be removed for directors leaving our district or stating that they are leaving our district, and that be included in policy.
Directors or administration?
Go ahead.
And I'm just wondering, just because I understand where that's coming from. I mean, I personally, like, if that's can make sure not to approve anything else. And I understand you want it more formally in policy.
Well, and especially if you're doing 50 to 100 a week, so.
Well, and right now
It's
it's
a lot to
less
keep track
because
of.
spending's been stopped. We try to have all the money encumbered by April 8th. And so now it's slowed down greatly, because with the audit, if you're purchasing supplies, we need to make sure you use them within the year. You can buy equipment that would be used for future years, but that's, just kind of on an audit standard. So I guess would it be possible, because we have to rework some of the language? I mean, it sounded like you guys like the McGonagall language, some of that to be included in there. Like, could you and I, Colin, meet and?
I mean, we could do that, and then so the reason that I'm kind of more chomping at the bit on here is we have, we chat about this policy, we bring it to committee, we have to bring it then to the general, and then it has to be brought to general again. So that because it's policy, it's gonna require at least 2 reads from
And I guess
there.
it's
So that's
one-
gonna be, I mean, literally, especially if we're doing monthly meeting, so that's the end of summer by the time that this actually goes out.
Yeah, I just worry about pushing this together without even a draft of a language that we feel comfortable with yet. And I think if you and I, or whoever, if we want to have a subcommittee or another meeting on the policy and or I could draft it up, however you guys want to handle it, but I don't think we should bring a policy forward when it's ready to be finally approved. Like where we're comfortable with, if the elements, if you want me to add in there, like if I could know those, then I'd be happy to work more specifically with you on like a final draft that we could vote on and then push forward.
You know what I think? I think we're after the same thing, but timing. So if we're doing a policy, this is what I'm hearing, is that we want to make sure the correct wording is in the policy moving forward before it actually becomes policy. However, our timing right now is that we have some key members in our administration who are leaving, but are not gone yet. But we want to make sure that that spending ability is limited between now and the time that they leave.
Any administrator too that will be leaving is gonna be gone by the end of June. I mean, I know we want to.
Right, by the time we do this, they're already gonna be gone. So it makes more sense to do this work right and let it take into the summer. But I understand, like, you wanna take some kind of action,
We do
like
have enough
now, so that spending.
We
and
could
maybe
always,
that's a
we
directive.
could always just add this to policy, that particular, I mean, I didn't even address the fact that I would like that brought to 50K rather than 100K. To me, this is the most important element
Right
of what I want to see out of the policy. And that's, we can always revisit policy, I'm full on board with that. But I just would like this particular element added and moved along, and that's why.
But I think too, if we look at that 50 versus 100K, and yeah, I just think we need to make sure we're solid on what we're gonna put in the policy before we bring it forward.
But here's my question, does it have to be a policy though? Like, can it just be a directive to you, like as, like a
We've had
certain dollar amount though for Angela, that if spending is above whatever, that our committee is notified
I
or
mean,
that?
So here's the line of thinking that I have on this.
Yeah.
We've given as directives as a board on things, and one of them particularly was the DPI thing that the disproportionality thing that was just sent to the state. All right. We gave a directive that we wanted that sent out to Superintendent Holtzman.
Right.
We didn't get it.
Right.
It wasn't until we did not get it. It had to be really, really, really requested and specifically in order for that to occur.
Yeah.
So when that is taking place, I'm sorry, but you know, that's just the way things
It's
are.
the same thing for two.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So why can't we just,
We can.
So go ahead,
Yeah,
man. You have
there's
something to
gotta be
say?
a way to do this.
No, he can do it right now, like, and I understand, because then the board, then the committee is giving directive for what she needs to do. So that's a form of policy or decision-making. The board is giving decision that they want the director to follow, and then we can support the policy in the future, or we can rewrite the policy to match it. Now, I'm not saying I'm trying to take control, I'm saying that the board, the committee will still bring it to general to approve, but it's like, if you sit and do nothing, nothing's gonna happen or change.
Correct.
So, and I understand your passion, and we're all here, we need to start doing things, and that's an actionable item, so if the committee makes a position, then we move forward down that road. So to be clear and concise of what the committee wants, I don't see why we can't move forward, and if somebody says we're in trouble, we can take it for what it is, but we have to act.
Why don't you have something to say to this, and then let's.
yeah, I was just, I mean, I don't see why we can't just say, especially if it's gonna take a while, we don't have to change the policy to say, hey, like, we're not gonna allow, or any spending must be approved by the board, right? By people leaving, currently leaving, right, between now and June 30th or whatever, leaving, so. I don't think we need to rewrite the policy, I think we can just tell you to.
State that, and then we change policy.
Later.
Yeah, that way we can kind of address the concern
Yes,
now,
okay.
and then we can.
Yeah,
put-
because I
I'm
think
okay
that
with
should be addressed. I think
But I
that
think
should.
you can vote on it though, because then, I mean,
There's actual vote.
there's a vote, and
Yeah.
then you can present to the board, which if I wasn't here, then you can present to the board saying, this is what the committee talked about, this is what we decided to do, and then you present it at the board for the public to see, and then the board will vote on it. So I think it's a good strategy to lead with the board by saying, this is how we're going to move forward, and then we're gonna correct policy because of the situation. And this has been happening over and over. It's gonna continue to happen.
All right, so then I'll change my motion to be from, as of, upon board approval, all spending, all director spending, will require board approval if director has stated their intention to leave the district.
You mean all administrator maybe, understanding?
Administrator, yes,
Yeah.
good call, thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second that. I guess I just wanted to.
Second, and then we discuss.
Yeah.
Okay, so you seconded?
I'll second it.
All right, open for discussion?
Yeah, I'm just thinking out loud here, but is there a way to circumvent that?
I don't see any.
Do you have an idea?
The gray area.
I mean, I'm just, like, what if,
Sorry.
and again, I don't wanna, I know we, just don't wanna say names, but let's just say hypothetically that.
Say me, I'm gonna.
Yeah, it's just, let's just say you're the guy that is, that we're like saying, hey, anything that Colin wants to spend, let's just put the brakes on it until we okay it. Hypothetically, what if Colin went to a subordinate and said, hey, who's also an administrator, and said, I want you to push this through yourself.
Angela does have control of those. If somebody's operating outside their lane, you're accountable for those, for people operating outside their lane, correct?
Correct, yes.
So unfortunately, at that point then, if there is somebody deviating outside their lane, she is held accountable to whatever occurs. I would,
If it's
I would
gonna
think
come
it
out
would
of
become a
a,
whole legal matter.
let's say someone's in charge of a given budget, and they say, well, why don't you put it through, it has to get that person's approval
right.
to come to the
There,
next
I mean, I'm
level.
not gonna, if I'm at Washington Junior High School, I'm not gonna be purchasing for Wilson Junior High School.
Mhm.
That's a misappropriation of funding.
I would just like to see some, I mean, I don't know if I can search around just in my class, connections and that kind of stuff too, but, for just how to word that, I mean, I don't know that we would directly put that in, if we would want to put that in the policy, or that's just a general directive.
It's a directive right now, and then it'll be worked into policy later.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea, just good business policy for down the road.
Yeah.
And I don't see, it doesn't have to be something personal right now, it just is the time we're addressing it, because we're kind of in that situation where, I mean.
Turnover rate's gonna continue to go up.
Yeah.
Right,
So
and
we're just trying to be.
and
Yeah,
other
proactive.
other administrators will leave, and so it's good that we're addressing this, it's not to be taken personally, but it's just something that should happen.
So it sounds like we're all in agreement on this, so I'm going to call a vote. All those in favor of, Angela, do you want to read back the?
Can I just say one more thing before we do that? I just want to be thoughtful and just make sure we're not doing anything that we might regret. One of the other candidates, or one of the other people that this might impact, who's also leaving, right, is in a HR capacity. So I just want to make sure that this won't in any way slow down the hiring process or anything, just not having full visibility on how that might impact.
The other thing I do that comes to mind, because I haven't, thought about this from all angles, just something to consider, and I'm happy to enforce whatever directive, that's what I need to do. Sometimes, like, a purchase may be in the best, already decided ahead of time, and it might be just the timing, you know what I mean? So that's just, there are a lot of independent variables, so I guess you don't want, it's like anyone leaving a marriage, you don't want them to one person running off the credit card, right? I mean, that's essentially what we're looking at, right? That's just what it is, and so I understand what that is, but sometimes there's like, let's say we were planning for a long time to do this, but then that person happens to get a job opportunity. It doesn't necessarily mean that what was identified as a need is discredited, so.
I think it just should be kicked into board approval.
Sure.
So that's. how you-
It's just the checks, I mean,
Yeah. so-
and
so
hopefully
if
it's not a
there's
very
a-
long time, and then it kind of keeps hey, we need to make sure that we get this, because obviously we're getting a mountain of approvals that we need to address. Let's get this rectified.
Right, and I hear what you're saying, I'm just thinking, like, I know we're in the middle of hiring season, and what if we gotta order some background checks, right? I don't want that to wait like 2 weeks and we get in, you know what I mean? So I guess it's just maybe anything outside, at least for that role, outside of ordinary business.
The board already approves personnel hires
Yeah, and the background check.
in the
So
background.
those are,
So
those
those
are
are
be
already
tied to it,
Okay.
they're already approved.
So are we limiting ourselves by like having this go to the full board, because that doesn't go for 2 weeks now, so we just went yesterday.
Well, right now, we're doing the directive that the committee is stating this. From there, the board, they'll get the opportunity to weigh in, but right now, the finance is stating that this is kind of the direction that they would like to. And this is how I would interpret it, that it would start there. You know, she's the overseer of our
Yeah.
budgets.
Yeah.
Knowing full well, I mean, obviously, if there's something that comes up, then bring it forward and we can discuss, because it hasn't been full board approval, but at this time, if you see something, then just, we're okay.
Because ironically, we're in a situation where by the time the board sees it,
Mhm.
certain individuals will
Right.
have very limited time left anyway. But it still is something we should address for the future.
Well, just thinking out loud, I mean, I don't know if this is appropriate or not, probably not, but, we have a quorum here, don't we, with 4 of us? Is that not, can't we just?
It has to be agenda driven. We don't
Is that
have,
on the
we
agenda?
don't, well, no, it has to be, so like, that would be a different committee. Okay, that's the board. Not just the finance committee.
Yeah.
So because we are the finance committee,
It's not really-
with Matt here, right, because we have to notice it in a proper fashion that this is the board not meeting, even though it's a quorum, so you know what I mean? So we couldn't address that in that fashion.
Otherwise, like, no matter what, you can attend any of the meetings.
Good idea.
Just be like,
It's a
oh, we're a
box,
quorum,
but-
let's just do what we want. Like, there's accountability for us to it.
So,
I'm not
okay.
100%
go ahead.
positive too, whether, like, as a directive, it needs to be official, I think it's just, you're telling, like, it's like the.
The reason we're doing it as a vote is primarily to have a formality behind it, rather than, hey, make sure you do this.
Okay,
So,
Yeah.
that's stuff I did, I'm not.
It's okay, so that being said, Angela, did you want to, can you
You
read
said
that commercial?
board approval, or all administrator spending will require board approval from the board.
Administrators who have given notice
Yeah.
of leave.
For any administrator. Okay, my vote, just kind of my vote's different from how the motion would be, okay.
Any administrator with intent to leave the district will require all spending be brought to the board for approval out of their budget.
Has to give.
I-
Could be board or budget and finance committees who have more time meeting.
Sure.
There's more.
I can tell you that in this case, though, I'm just, because I'm getting, given a directive, and I gotta, I take that very seriously when I'm held to it.
Yeah.
Like, in this role specifically, there have been purchases made for next year that are very typical to the role that get purchased in advance for preparation, so I'm just saying, like,
I understand, and I understand that you said at some point, what do you
like
just
large
can't-
expenditures.
can't leave the credit card just sitting on the table.
Or out of the ordinance.
And they're reasonable expenditures for what's, so I
And rather than cherry pick, well, these expenditures and these expenditures and these expenditures, kind of just saying, well, all right,
are you saying from this point forward?
I am, yeah.
Okay.
Is there a reason for?
I was saying in the last couple of weeks, there have been some orders made by administrators who just in preparation to the next, but I can say that, they're already.
It's not gonna
orders.
stopgate that, because
Huh?
it wouldn't stopgate that, because I'm not gonna look back in the history.
I'm just
I'm
clarifying,
looking to move
just because
forward.
it's gonna be something that's,
Okay, so,
it won't be filled until July 1, but it's already,
Yeah,
well, we gotta wait till Tony gets back for the vote anyways.
I want to make sure too that we, just whatever decisions that we're making don't interfere with the day-to-day operations for the school district.
But then,
Even when we're talking about the policy and stuff down the road, like, we gotta make sure that there's a good balance there, that I understand what we're trying to do. But at the same time, I don't want to make that, call it becomes interfering with stuff, so.
and if we find that it is, we can always peel it back too.
Well,
I mean,
that's
these
true.
aren't permanent decisions.
No,
These
that's
are
very
directives that, hey, we feel that this is a need right now. If we're finding that it is, the directors have the ability to bring forward, hey, this is kind of putting some pain point to us.
Mhm.
Okay, well, maybe we need to reanalyze this and move from there. I mean, it's a very fluid body.
Yeah.
We have the ability to ebb and flow.
That's true. And, just going back to, like, just because Tony's not here, I feel like I can going back to the
Matt wants
Brand
that
Bus
too,
thing.
so.
No,
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just-
But going back to the Brand Bus thing, like, I feel like we should do the, kind of the estimates and stuff that we're talking about, or the quotes. And then have it, Angela, somewhere where you keep record of it so that every year this same discussion isn't happening again. And I do fully believe that we will all, I feel like 99.9% positive that we're gonna come back and see that Brand is definitely our best source, because he's not gonna come up and tell us like overblow his price, because he needs us to survive. So anyway, I feel confident with that, but I do think that we need to put it somewhere so that it can be
Matt, did you
looked
have
at
something?
again.
Yeah, you're worried about the expenditure of things and not to worry about the day-to-day. I understand completely what you're saying in the perspective that we don't want to bog down.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we need to change things, because obviously what's been happening isn't working effective for our children anymore. So
Yeah.
like there's, which you have discretion over, you'll see things that are gonna not work out as good as they want. But right now, all we're saying, all that you guys are trying to say is that if there's something that's spent, it needs to go through the approval of the board. So you're just trying to provide transparency. So yes,
Yeah.
the director then will have to prove why it's important to the committee, and then you guys can approve it. It's not like you're trying to stop their job, it's just you're trying to provide them some accountability to why you're spending their money.
Oh, yeah, no, I was referring more to like when we start changing the policy around in the numbers and stuff.
Mhm.
So we
I
do have a
know,
motion on
I-
the table though, so let's keep the
Okay.
discussion to the motion.
Sorry, Tony's got-
So, anybody, all those in favor of the motion of, what? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. Yep, so that'll be the new directive to the finance director, and we'll be bringing it to board approval in full. Next item on the agenda is the sub-APA valuation. Angela, do you want to touch on that?
Yeah, I just, the key benefits, concepts is, an actuarial group that does, just what's required. It's a required study that we're supposed to get, we're required to get every 2 years. They do like the full study, and then they update the tables, and it's a piece that goes in the audit booklet every year. And, what they do is they talk about the study itself and the proposal, as you've seen, the fees that are included. We have 2 different types of, like our pension valuation offer, and then what's called like a stipend table, or the stipend tables and the stipend valuation. As you look later on in the proposal, there's kind of an overview starting on page 7 and 8 of what they call OPEB benefits are, so you can kind of read what some of those are that our retirees are able to take advantage of. And really, it's just a valuation of our liability. And they just had come forward, this is a standard 2-year contract, they're very reliable. In comparison, there's very, very few companies that do this, and so they're very reasonably priced, very reliable, quality work that they always offer to school districts. And, they offered just a fee to do this that would be, like we could do just the regular standard 2-year contract that we need to do this in soon for our audit, but they offered us an ability to have a 6-year contract. And so they outlined on page 3 what the fees would be if we would want to take advantage of a small discount. I think Mark and I had looked at it, just when we looked at it, it was like a 5% savings if you would commit to 6 years with them. So we really need to move on the study ASAP. So I thought I'd bring this to your knowledge, just that this is the fee that we paid for this. So we would pay, $7,500 and $1,600 if we would have the longer commitment, or we would have just, what is like the $7,900 There is some other fees that we could have in the $1,600, $1,650, if we would just go with a 2-year.
So which one are you recommending that we go with at this time, Angela?
They're very reliable. There's very few that do this. They do extremely quality work, and that's what we really need with this. And so I would recommend going with them for the 6 years, just because there's not a large market for quality work on this. That's
Right, but so what I'm asking is,
the 6-year
see.
agreement is what I would.
This is an entirety, all these different items that we see on this 1 through 6 here. That is the amount for having those services for 6 years, is this correct?
Correct, yes.
Not
Correct.
each year?
Oh.
Not each year, it's the total contract for 6 years.
Well, yeah, for each 2-year period. So like that we would pay the 7,500 and the 1,600 this year. And then we would pay, it kind of goes by 1 and 2 are for the 22, 23, 24, 25 are the lines 3 and 4, and then 5 and 6 are 26 and 27.
And the return on investment here is just keeping us competitive in what we have, correct?
Yeah, and it's small savings. It's not, yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to follow this along here. So why are we doing this and
We're required just for our audit and by the GASB standards to complete an actuarial study. Every 2 years, we have to have it renewed to just value what the liability for the district on our OPEB. So like they'll collect information, like a roster of our employees and their retiree dates. And so they look at our benefits and how much that costs and say like, how much is it gonna cost the district? Each year they'll go 30 years out, I think, at least 20 years, 20 to 30 years, and say like what the valuation of that is. So looking at these studies, we're able to see we have a very huge growing liability. So that's where we have them do this study, and then we retool and design our benefits, and then they reevaluate it every 2 years and revalue it for the audit purposes.
how much does that cost us a year?
How much does it cost each year?
Well, I mean, I see this, but just the benefits, for the,
Oh,
Well, that's what the study is for, isn't it?
yeah.
So that's what
We
they're
pay,
providing.
I don't have the figure right on hand. I could get it for you easily. For health insurance, I mean, we pay,
like 12
if
million.
I'm remembering correct from our audit, the total value last year, I want to say we paid $500,000 towards retirement health care.
So this is just for people that are retired, correct?
No, this is, so
Well,
OPEB,
this is
OPEB stands for other post-employment benefits. So these are post-employment benefits.
Our OPEB liability, your liability just looks into the future and forecasts it from that standpoint, but we do just is a major budget item. Like we spend a lot of, a considerable amount of money as a district supporting what the benefits that we've provided for our retirees. So a retiree that someone retires at 57 years old and they qualify for the insurance, they will be able to get the insurance like maybe a little smaller increased premium rates, but they get to stay on our insurance until they're 65. And then we pay the other half, the employer premium, the balance of what they're required to pay. So that's where, like as a money cost savings, the study is one thing we're required just to get to measure and see where the status of that program is. And then that as a budget line item is pretty heavy. So sorry, I'm kind of straying.
So,
Sorry.
go ahead. Kathy, go ahead.
Oh, just to be clear, so if we go with the 6-year contract, we would need to pay the full amount at this time, which would be $28,050.
We would pay as we would go, and then
Oh, we would, okay.
I'm sorry.
So there'd be about an $850 savings, but we,
No. So that's for if you spend with a credit card or if you use a direct deposit.
oh.
That's not anything.
If you looked at the
yeah,
page
I-
before, we would save, about $400 each, just for this first one.
Okay, thank you. I actually have that like line covered.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah.
So, okay, so we'd say $850 just by paying check or whatever versus credit card.
Yeah, but then you're saying that there's a $400 cost savings by doing a 6-year contract versus a 1 year. Oh, I mean, and these are relatively,
you know,
Small dollar.
specific bodies that do these things. Actuaries are, you know, familiar with what actuaries do in insurance. I guess that being said, and they're doing it for 6 years, it seems just like, okay, well, it's just a partnership. So we're paying for a partnership to analyze what we got going on
That's really
for
what it
a
is.
duration of time.
Correct.
Does anybody have anything more that they would like to ask or discuss on the matter?
No, but given your knowledge base, like, what is your recommendation?
I recommend we go with it. I'm just saying that I think that that's you're having somebody do a deep dive into, there, like Tony was asking before, you know, what are these things that you're paying, what is the amount that we pay for this? What is the amount that we pay for this?
Mhm.
All those things should be provided, I believe, in that study.
Mhm.
If they're not, I don't think we're getting a very good study.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
doing a study, it is good, and so I believe that this is a good measure to do. So I'd be in favor of it personally.
It seems like such a small dollar amount item too. Why would we mess with it every 2 years if,
Correct.
you know, someone who thinks,
And we don't
knows
really
more about this
necessarily need
area.
action on it. I mean, if you guys want to approve it, you know, I mean, we really, you know, we have to kind of get moving on it soon, just in preparation for our audit, just to have the tables and stuff updated. So, I mean, we can wait until June 14th for me to proceed, or would I have permission to move ahead with it?
It's budgeted, right?
Yeah, it is
I'm
actually.
okay with it.
So then let's
And I
move
can go
forward.
in with the exact amounts.
All those in favor of the, to move forward with the op-ed valuation proposal, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? All right, great.
So I won't put it forth to the regular board.
I mean, if it's budgeted, we still
It is
have to.
budgeted,
If
it's
you
not.
mean that consent agenda, right?
Yeah, it's in the consent agenda. I mean,
That you, yeah, okay.
yeah, we still, I would hate, because all of a sudden say Carrie's like, hey, or Matt, or, you know, they're like, yeah, I ain't on board with this, let's not do this. Then we're not doing our, So- yep, so let's just, we can only move as fast as we can move.
Yeah.
This is as fast as we can move, so I'm good with it, we voted for it, but it still needs to go through for the board. Next item on the agenda is the 2022, 2023 budget, information discussion. Angela?
Yeah, I provided some information here. We use their budget forecast model, which provides a lot of really nice tools for us. And I thought just to kind of give you guys some information, Colin just asked me to put some things together. I realize it's really, really small printing with the revenue limit to, you know, our biggest challenge, and that's why I included both the enrollment projections and the revenue limit. So what's really challenging is that we are funded based on our enrollment. So that's our basic revenue stream. So what they do is they take to calculate your base revenue, they take an average of the prior 3 years. And, you know, our enrollment average is going down 65 students. And so right now, and this is where being that low spending district comes in. We receive $10,000 per student, where most districts will receive like $12,000, $13,000, $14,000 per student. So that's where really from a revenue standpoint, we suffer the greatest compared to other school districts, and especially that's where that revenue cap was set in 1994. It was a point in time, and they measured on that. Sometimes they've given a little bit more of a boost to low spending districts, but there's no new money on per pupil. That's always the term that's provided for next year. So that's really what's going to be a challenge for us. So and we have slight declining enrollment. So.
Well, I want to add to that too. So you got to follow sometimes things that are going outside of our community. And if you look to every single of the gubernatorial candidates, aside from Evers currently, every single one of them is speaking about universal school choice. All right, universal school choice is also then taking those private institutions, and they have the ability to get
money for each one of the students as well.
Mhm.
So that's gonna come into play. You have the, if you keep your finger on the pulse of different communities, a lot of them are seeing some tension between public schools and the parents. That's occurring. I honestly think that there is going to be, this is based on, current climate. When you start allowing a open enrollment, universal open enrollment to schools, you very well could see, especially seeing as how we have Rock Holly, building a brand new high school, they're gonna be expanding their school. There's other Lutherans expanding their school. These are all private institutions coupling with that universal school choice. You very well could see this number even bigger than what it currently is showing. I mean, that's my viewpoint that I wanted to bring up to that we need to be aware of.
And provided the current, what we have for numbers now, and just looking ahead, we're able to forecast where, it's not finite. There's a lot of independent factors that could impact that, and that's a big thing. So, we're gonna have, especially with no new money per pupil in the second year of the biennium budget, we're looking at using a significant amount of our ESSER dollars that we had as, $7 million for ESSER 3, and that we are, able to use to cover, the increases for staff. But that's like after next year, we calculated that we have roughly $500,000, perhaps less than ESSER. And then we're going to be working with that's falling off of the budget, which is a little over $1 million, which will help kind of balance some of the shortfalls. But one of the largest things that we're going to have to do and be charged with as a district is we're going to have to look at, we added several positions in order to use the ESSER dollars. There was no way to use the ESSER dollars without adding positions. Okay, and so as we finish using the ESSER dollars and work towards a balanced budget, we're going to have to do some really hard conversations about how we're going to use our budget dollars moving forward. Our salaries and benefits are 80% of our budget, so that's
But Angela, so to that point though, when we were bringing those positions aboard, we did request and state that any positions that were tied to ESSER funds would have to go through the regular process, just like as any other position, that those positions are sunsetting due to their funding regardless. So that, I don't know if that would actually be
we're gonna have to look at all of that,
Yeah.
and we were very specific when we, planned as a director team along with Superintendent Holzman about which positions we were adding and all of those kinds of things. So, we're this fall, we're gonna have to really look at that. Anytime we do have a reduction in force, if that happens, which will likely be the case, the administration puts together the proposal, and that's decided upon by the board. That is required to be brought to board approval. The administration doesn't have authority to make those decisions. So just so that you are aware that that's part of what your role will be in the process. So
when are we anticipating doing that or getting that information and tackling that topic?
we're going to have to start looking at it just in the scope of everything, like getting ready for the next school year and everything. We would start looking at staffing for the next subsequent 22-23 late fall, winter next year. That's when we'd have to start taking a look at that.
So when is this gonna really catch us? Is this next school year or 2 school years?
Not this coming school year, but the future years.
So what are the dollars that we're talking about here? Do we know yet, or?
Well, we have, just as far as, the budgets, we're looking at, a shortfall of $2.8 million next year, but we're using over $3 million of ESSER funds,
So in translation, that's actually 5.
So, well,
It's 2.8 per year.
but it's,
right?
we have to cut the staff or just expenditures that much in order to balance the budget.
So
So,
if we could find a way to save $2.8 million, we should be in a good spot in 2 years.
So it'd be amazing.
I've said, when I was on council, Nichols put forth a budget that had a $5 million shortfall. And I'll tell you flat out, the amount of people that we had to cut was very painful, and there was quite a few. So you're talking big movements.
Well, I don't, here's my thinking, right? I mean, you said 80% of our budget is, for payroll, right? So that means there's 20% of it that's not the payroll, right? Which means there's, 20% of 80 million is still like 16 million, right? Or however that math shakes out. So I'm not saying let's cut people. I'm saying let's find a way to, that $16 million or whatever it is, we got to find a way to cut that. If we can cut that, down.
Within the items that are purchased within supplies and services, and there are ways we'll be able to cut for sure. But when you look at anything in the budget, what moves the needle on adding most anything is salaries.
We're kind of getting into the next topic or line here, the budget solutions.
Okay.
But so that's,
So I just want to get an idea. So really what you're saying, it's $2.8 million. That's the number that we need to, every year that we need to come up. We need to find a way to bring our costs down, $2.8 million.
Or with a referendum.
as I prepare the budget for this next year and we see where we fall to, we're forecasting that we will have to use a small amount of fund balance next year. And then in the year after that, potentially. So, one of the things too, to really, a major point to make that impacts next year and, kind of combining the topic items, if you look at the very bottom line, our mill rates, if you look, we were at a $7.81 per thousand for our mill rates. You can see that our land value continues to increase. So when that's spread out, the levy amount, because there was relief given in the tax, which is great for our taxpayers. I wouldn't take this, as gospel right now because the values are preliminary, but we could be looking at a mill rate as low as $5.90 next year. Likely will be in the $6 range, mid to higher six, and it's gonna differ. So things like when we went to referendum for the non-recurring referendum, that added to the mill rate, and we were, one of the big things that we talked about is that we were gonna be underneath $7.81. Well, we're well below that.
We're historically.
Historically.
So help me understand, when you say mill rate, I've heard that term before, but I'm not familiar with it.
Yeah.
Can you give that to me in layman's terms?
So mill rate is just when you have your home values, like your $100,000 home value per thousand, you would pay $7.81, okay? So that's where your school level or your property tax for the schools would be based on that amount. There's a lot of equalized value. There's a tool and some information on the website too that addresses that as well. But then that amount has gone down significantly. So that's a huge, huge savings to taxpayers. So we're historically low. But if we look at our operational needs are growing. So even though we have lower students that are, keeping the roofs repaired, the general operations of the district, those costs continue to increase. So really, one thing the board will be charged with considering, even as early as next year, is looking at renewing the $4.3 million referendum and increasing that significantly in ways is going to need to be considered because we're not able to meet our expenses, quite obviously.
Is that 4.3 per year? Or is that?
Per year.
So
And
why would
we're
we
in the
ask for
first year.
4.3 if we're only needing to come up with 2.8?
Because we're using the other part of that is we're using ESSER funds for it.
We would be under $6 million if we didn't have that 4.3 in there. We'd be under.
All right, so yeah, I'm just trying to, all right, so I know ESSER is related to COVID. So let's just say a normal year, like let's just say eventually we get back to a normal, situation. What's the amount we need to come up with every year in order to balance the budget? Is it 5 million, 6 million, what's that
We're
number?
probably looking at $6 to $7 to $8 million, you know, and we've got to, and I'd have to run a lot more calculations before we would know like what we would feel confident with going. And we also have like extensive capital improvement needs as well, you know, that, you know, if you do a referendum for capital improvements, that's a separate levy that adds on to that mill rate in its own way.
So, and I'm sorry to cut you off, I just
Hey,
want
you're
to
fine.
understand my question. So, after this ESSER fund's depleted, if I'm hearing you right, it just to pay our expenses and to function as a district, you're saying right now, we need to come up with another $6 to $8 million per year, right?
We have the $4.3 million in a non-recurring referendum for this year, next year, and the year after. So we're gonna.
When the referendum's gone, that's
Yeah,
what
so
I'm saying.
our shortfall in fund balance was around, I think when we looked ahead at the forecast, was around $1 million, you know, in future years, because we're also gonna have debt service that's going to be falling off, and so we won't owe, so that will lessen the deficit. So, but what we do need to know is that after the 23-24 budgets, we don't have that $4.3 million. And then if we don't have voters approve to continue that referendum, we won't be able to operate at the current staffing levels.
Well, and let's also put in there that if the board chooses to go to referendum, you can only go to referendum certain years at certain times. You don't get to just do it, you know, fall, like it used to be, you could go for vote spring, fall. Now it's half that or less.
How long have we
Like
been
a
in a
odd years, you
referendum?
could do certain things and it's weird.
How long have we been in this referendum situation? Has that been?
They've been kicking this can down the road for quite some time.
Yeah, just because we're a low spending district, we've had no choice, you know.
So who determines that? Like, when you say low spending district, is this like?
So we receive $10,000 per pupil. So if you would take, and I can show this to you when you come in or anytime if you want to see. If you look at, I want to say when I was in Ballers, we received $12,000 per student. If you multiply $2,000 more by 5,000 students, that's a lot more money to work with. You know, it's a lot more money to educate and to use for educational programs. So we've been very conservative with our spending historically, and we pride ourselves in that. But there's only so much you can do when your revenue limit, you know, your revenue is limited and you only have so many students. And then when you have declining enrollment, they have hold harmless provisions where you get a little bit more from the state to kind of help you bridge that gap as you're going down. But where, you know, a normal business would look at increasing its profit margin, you know, where our profit is going down by things we can't control, but our expenses keep going higher due to industry. And so that's, the rate that they're increasing the per pupil revenue does not match, is way under what CPI is, way under.
So why are we a low spending district? Who determines that? Is that taxpayers?
It was
here?
determined in 1994 when the revenue limit was, the revenue caps were put in place. What they did is they took, in 1993 or 1994, they took a time and a stamp in time and said, this is what you're spending now is what your per pupil spending is going to be limited to. So districts who were spending a lot more and spending and being less conservative and more liberal with their money get more per pupil now. We were being conservative. We were doing awesome. We were penalized for doing well.
And is that the state that penalized us?
Yes.
True.
So why don't can we appeal that?
Yes, but you really
You
need to
talk
do.
to your legislatures,
you
and
need
we
to
need to increase per pupil amounts, and we need to.
I mean, to me, that just seems like if that's true, and
Yeah.
if everything you're saying is true, and we're just
It is.
getting hosed because we were financially responsible,
Mhm.
to me, it should be the other way around, right?
Right.
Like,
It
we were like
should be.
really
It
good
is.
with the money, we should get more.
Completely backwards. I agree. And so that's where, like, you know, we work very hard to save spending and trim spending as much as we can, but when it's like this with our pupil count and then the costs keep going up, that's hard. I mean.
Do we, so as far as, I mean, we can only control what we can control, right? I mean, we can't go into legislation and say this is the way it's gonna be. So everybody, let's be real here, the legislation, they're aware of this situation. It's been discussed many, many times. This has been talked about for many, many years. As far as that situation goes, we kind of know that this is just where we're at, right?
We need to do the best with what we
Right.
can, and then we just have to positively advocate as, you know, as a board, as a district. You know, when they're working on the next year, you're gonna hear a lot about the next biennium budget, you know, and so that when you hear per pupil spending, you know, that's, you know, what they did this last year was tricky, and this is what you gotta listen for, is they will say, we are increasing state aid. Okay, so they did increase state aid, but when you have the revenue cap, they said it like this, okay? So this is your full revenue cap, and let's say state aid is at 60%, and then the levy for the taxpayers is 40%. If they increase, you know, let's say they increase the state aid and they say, we're gonna pay 75%, that just means that only 25% has to be covered by the taxpayers. It doesn't increase this. It just changes the proportion of what the state covers and what the taxpayers pay. So that's great for tax relief, but at the end of the day, it means no new revenue for us.
And the reason, and sorry, don't mean to cut you
Okay.
off because we've been at this for 2 hours now.
Yeah.
So I kind of want to get it moving along. The reason that I had requested this 2022, 2023 thing in the budget be put on the agenda is because we are aware of the situation.
Mm-hmm.
We have a situation.
Yeah.
And so when I approached Angela on this, I had requested that we start talking about that budget earlier, because we're going to be having some work in this area, and this work is going to be significant. So having these discussions, being mindful of what's coming aboard, you know, we're having different funds that we're going to be talking about, so that we are aware of what these funds are. That's the thinking behind this. It isn't an actionable item, it's pretty much informational, but that was the reason that I wanted to have that discussion take place. I am gonna move this along to the next item. So I apologize if you guys have more questions on the matter. Feel free to reach out to Angela, but I would like to get this moving along. The next one would be budget solutions, just so that we're at least touching on that. Different things that I wanted to ask about what budget solutions we are looking at. One of them was grants. Are we looking at, is there more opportunity in grants? That's free money. It's outside of our, you know, we're aware that the state provides us chunks of change.
Mm-hmm.
We're aware that that, you know, we can only control that to a certain extent. Us being proactive and us seeking other revenue sources might be a beneficial idea. Obviously, there's the labor lines, the you know, other assets. Do we need to maintain other assets, programs, things like that? What budget solutions have been looked at, and then other people have budget solutions. So Angela, if you have budget solutions that have been looked at, I'd like to hear those.
The main ones, you know, and I hate to sound like a broken record on it, but, you know, we're looking at the healthcare. We're looking for solutions there, most definitely. That will have, you know, definite impacts things that we can reshape with that, still provide excellent healthcare coverage to our employees and work to save money. Redoing and looking at the OPEB, that will be a big thing too. That might be a little bit more of a marathon type thing. We give a guaranteed benefit. We move to potentially move and consider a guaranteed contribution, but we would have a time period where we want to make sure we would sunset it very carefully. Because people, when they're at advanced ages in their employment, you know, we want to make sure that you can make it so people who are close to retirement still get their same benefits, while you think of a different way to offer it for the younger generation that is still, you know, works on capitalizing on interest in other accounts because you put money aside for them, versus going on a wing and a prayer based on the guaranteed benefit where we don't know the value down the road. Those two things, and then our director team and administration, our interim superintendent, we're gonna have to look at staffing. And we're also gonna have to look at, the big thing is we're gonna have to, definitely the board's gonna need to consider, we can go for, either, we have a reoccurring operational referendum. And so, as you say, we keep on having to revisit this. One thing we can do as a board, instead of having to revisit, we can make it a standing a standing operational, a non-recurring referendum and recurring referendum are two different things. Now we have non-recurring, so that means we have to vote on it. If we make it recurring, we can say, we've tried to see how we can live without this money, we need it. So we're gonna just build in, we're gonna say $6 million is gonna be built in, and we're gonna do $2 million on top of that the next couple of years, to make, there's lots of ways you can go about that, but I'm just throwing it out randomly.
Sure.
But we can, the board's gonna have to look at that. The board, is charged also, you charge me to come up with a budget, manage the budget and solutions and stuff, but the board, we're gonna be coming to the board for support with those things. And because of the timing of referendums, we can go already as soon as next April. And then for some reason, if there'd be a problem with it where it wouldn't pass, we could come next year and work at things that way.
But it's a year and a half later, if I remember right, depends on how, if it's odd or even year, so it's like spring of one year, fall of the next year, so it's almost like they're a year and a half apart. So it's part of why we have to start looking at this stuff now, because that's right around the corner.
So what was that second one? You said healthcare, and then was that OPEB?
Yes.
That's the one we just talked about, right?
Yes, that's the benefit that we offer. The contract is about evaluation to kind of gives us the status and the ongoing liability for it, but it's built a major part of our budget, providing that benefit to retirees. So.
Okay.
And then, just the healthcare, and we're gonna have to look at staffing and then look at referendums. We look at capital improvements too. That's a big thing that, Chris Dupre, Mark Olson, and myself work hard on that, to have that. We're gonna put it, especially to utilize what's called Fund 46. We won't go into it today, but we need to have a plan published with the states, to show what our plans are with that. So we're working to assemble that in the next 2 or 3 weeks before the next meeting.
Have you guys ever looked at and I don't know if this will make sense if we're self-funding or not, but have you guys ever looked at PEOs before?
A PPO?
A PEO?
No, I don't believe we have.
Yeah, so I don't know how they may apply to education. I could ask the one that I work with if they could work with districts or not, but basically, in my business, everyone's dealing with health insurance costs and all this crap, and we were able to find a group that you basically just shop it out, right? They came in 20% below other groups that we work with. So, that's a big cost. I'm just trying to think outside the box here, ways that might, I don't know how that compares to self-funding because I'm not an insurance guy, but I'm just trying to.
Well, and we are self-funded, and we have a PPO right now, which is more like your traditional healthcare, and then we are looking at high deductible health plan options with an HSA. So, there's a higher deductible, and so we can look at all kinds of data. Our brokers do an awesome job of saying this is the average spending, and this many members spend less than $1,000, and we can do that where we can decrease our liability, but it's very tricky. But we do need to revamp what we're currently.
And to go to your point, so I guess doing this study of the OPEB, that will give us kind of some insight to areas that maybe we can look at too. A lot of companies have done the HSA offsets. I personally don't deal in health insurance too often. I'm licensed for it, but I don't write it ever. I'm familiar with PPOs. PEO, maybe I have to go back and do some more going back into my study materials. Maybe I don't remember that part, but I'll have to, now I'm curious, I'm gonna look into that. But we have those different options. I forgot my train of thought here. So I'll just, does anybody else have anything that they wanted to add to the discussion as far as
solutions that they want to maybe direct Angela to look into,
Yeah,
or other things of that nature?
I do. Have you ever looked into performance contracting?
For the,
Just energy stuff, in the district?
That's what synergy is.
I know you had shared a little bit of that that we could look into that. We have not before, so.
Yeah,
just-
well, what I sent you before was just commodity buying, which I think is a quick win that we could, we could probably get an assessment done within like weeks, it wouldn't take that long.
Mhm.
So I would, how much do we spend a year on gas, do you know, off the top of your head?
I don't know off the top of my head, for commodities, for food service, we do get into that stuff, but we could.
Yeah, if you
Yeah,
could
we
just
can-
find out, I don't need an answer now, but if you could just say, hey, here's the annual spend, I could, we can do this without sucking up a whole lot of anyone's time. We can at least assess the opportunity, but if it's just to give you some insight, one of my customers down in Milwaukee had a bunch of old buildings, and we were able to save them 20% without, it doesn't cost anything. So it's just like you're going to a gas station now, and you might be paying $5 a gallon, and, instead of paying $5 a gallon, you can pay $3 a gallon, right, or whatever the cost is.
You buy a chunk, you
And
buy a
our
bulk,
gas,
pretty much.
actually,
Well,
our
it's
gas,
just commodity buying, right, so we're buying the gas anyway. And
our
there's-
gas, we do buy our gasoline, we buy through, we work with the city on that. So
I was referring to natural
the
gas.
natural gas.
Yeah, so when I say that, yes, I was just using that as an analogy. Like,
Yeah.
you're buying it anyway, so instead of paying $5, like, we could, and that, if that's a big spend for us, we have some big buildings, it gets cold here.
Yes.
I'm guessing our heating bills are probably, pretty high in the winter time.
Mhm.
So that could be a quick win. And performance contracting really just refers to any sort of energy efficiency, project that in lieu of looking at capital dollars to fund it, you could use the savings to fund the project.
Yes.
And in many cases, I know there's groups that specialize in education, and they can look at, obviously lighting is one aspect, but there's other areas of energy consumption in a district that, could be looked at. And, again, just, they can be structured so that they're cash flow positive, right? So if we're looking at the budget, let's just say, we can save 10 grand a month, and then we pay back like 8 grand or whatever that number is. And it's, just looking for ways to cut the fat where we can.
Yeah, so no, I can definitely with that. So with going into the synergistic, they help you with optimize your systems themselves. And what they do help you get connected with, and we did the ALC was the main focus for this year to get control of just the temperature sensing with the buildings and stuff. So with that being complete, I know one thing that we did look into, and we can look into more, I'm sure, is focus on energy, because we don't have a plan, and that's one definitely where we can get return on doing LED lighting and that kind of stuff, and they work with us on that kind
I'm
of
the
stuff.
guy with Focus on Energy. I'm about to get some big award from them in a couple months.
Huh?
I can help you with that.
We can't do the conflict of interest.
I'm talking
but-
about connecting you with Focus on Energy. I know people.
All he's doing is making the introduction, is what he's saying.
Oh, and we already have a contact with Focus on Energy
Okay.
that has helped us out. So yes, so we do
Yeah.
have some of those things, but yes, and if definitely if, especially, a lot of you bring, experience and you can, give suggestions, we're happy to look into them. So, yeah.
Right, and some of these, like I said, these can be quick wins, right? Like this,
Mhm.
if we could have had this done, if I would have gotten a gas bill when I asked you about it like a month and a half ago, we could have had this on the way, right? So I'm just letting you know, like, these are things that aren't gonna suck up a lot of time that we could start moving on.
Yeah,
So if you guys want to maybe have that discussion, I would encourage that discussion to be had, that'd be great.
yes.
Kathy, did you had one thing that you just kind of bent my ear on, if you want to maybe bring that up?
Yeah, this is totally thinking outside the box, and I don't want to alarm anyone, but I thought, we're talking about ways to save money, because no matter what, this is gonna hurt, right?
Yeah.
So part of me wants to say, I recuse myself from budget and finance and it's tough. I know it's not possible, but one of the thoughts that I had was how many people work in this building? And maybe this is a building that's too costly for us to maintain and should think about selling it and moving offices into our schools. I mean, is that something that, again, this is outside the box. I just thought of it as we're sitting here, and I know that it hurts because no matter what we do, it's gonna hurt, but maybe that's something we could look into. Maybe it would be a terrible idea but it might be a really good idea, it might save us a lot of money.
I think for smaller districts, like in Dallas, we were in the old high school office, you know, but there were maxed on capacity. I'm pretty sure I can say that with confidence, but I understand
Yeah,
maybe
but
other things.
We're talking about reducing our numbers in the schools too, though. That's what a big part of
So
our
by
conversation
usage of
has
space.
been like, oh, we're down all these students. Well, if that's true, that means opening up classrooms. I'm just saying, it's something to look into.
Sure.
I get about the idea of being protective in that word for 30th and, you know.
It's like a
state.
space study, like just using.
But we should look into it, right?
Well,
Like,
Even just the sense of, say there is a, you know, even if you take some of those, we can do everything almost virtual, right? If we have some of these, some administration that might be, or some of, you know, some of the directors that may be in the school, and we're dealing with behavioral issues in the same sense, well, now there's some teeth to making sure that behavioral issue is really taken care of, because, hey, this is their work environment. They're gonna wanna make their work environment the best possible. Obviously, they already do. Obviously, they already do make it, they wanna make it as best as possible. But at the same time, it's having eyes on, having presence, being in it, rather than outside of it.
Yeah, you know, I think that's it. Oh, sorry.
oh, no, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's, I would definitely not feel comfortable speaking to that myself, but like definitely something we could look into, you know.
I think we would owe it to ourselves and to our constituents to look into it anyway. I mean, you know, when you walk around the building here, there's a number of large conference rooms that, you know, are used, but also at the same time, a lot of them sit empty for a while. And, you know, like, there are certain offices that probably could be in school. I can think of one right off the bat that a person has an office in a school and also has an office here. So like maybe it's just a thought, right? It's just, again, you ask for some solutions.
Yeah.
It's outside the box.
Yes, and we're gonna have.
It is a growing, it's a pain, no matter what we do when it comes to cutting anything, it's going to hurt.
So in the interest of time, I'm going to just request, Angela, can we have this budget solutions and updates on the budget on every finance committee meeting, so that we're always thinking of what we have to do and solutions to what we're going to be doing.
Sure.
And we can always be bringing it forward. The other thing I would like to encourage the committee and the board to also be mindful of, when we're approving expenses, approving endeavors, that we're being mindful of the situation that we are in currently, and we are not seeking to spend things or purchase things. You don't buy a house or, you know, look to build a house in the middle of a recession where the materials are 100% over what they normally are. Usually you kind of wait till it's a more opportune time to take on those endeavors. So that being said, I think that those are things that we need to keep in mind as we move forward. So with that, does anybody else have anything for the good of the order? Because I would like to seek a movement to adjourn.
I have one question.
Yes.
About, the new hires and then the sunsetting of those new hire positions. Could you just give me a ballpark number of how many new hires in the last year of new positions that were created?
I wanna say.
Because I have a number that I think from a citizen standpoint, but if you could verify it for me.
I'd have to look to be sure. I wanna say between 20 and 25 positions, I wanna say.
Okay. So obviously looking forward, budget solutions, we're gonna need to be, you know, thinking about reallocating those positions into different ways that we can help our children more than what they're doing right now. That's a whole hard fact, and I look forward to making those conversations, but that was a great point about how we're gonna have to, we need to somehow provide an audit system of our expenditures more so than we do that now, but we need to do a deep dive, and that's what the research synergy, and that's what Tony's referring to as well. And that outside of the box thinking, we're gonna have to do that with our interim superintendent. That's what we're gonna.
We also
have to
do have a strategic plan coming up too.
Yes, correct.
So keep that in mind as we move forward.
But let's keep on going.
Tony, one?
If I could just add one final item, and maybe this could be part of the strategic plan discussion, but I would love to get to the point where, these meetings are great, and I apologize if I'm asking questions, it's really just me getting my head to understand what's going on here. what would be super helpful for me is if we can get to the point where I just get some sort of a visual dashboard that shows like our budget every month and just how we're doing with the budget. And,
Okay.
Let me just give you a real quick example of like the way I do it for my company. Green is good, red is bad, right? So if something's green, I'm like, hey, Ryan, high five, great job. If it's red, then I'm like, all right, why are we like below this? And so it just kind of draws your attention to, it gives you the big picture snapshot, kind of in a quick one-page summary. And again, I'm just throwing this out there. I just think that would help make our.
Yeah, and we do provide the financials of the district every month on a month basis, and you can see the comparison from one year to the next, and you can see it broken down by object.
Okay.
And so that gives a dashboard itself.
Great.
And so there's like with the Baird model, like there, especially once we're to Skyward, it might have some capability with Alio right now, just with the volume of work, we haven't been able to get their base or like expand on the reporting that we currently provide. But it might be possible to give some more detailed graphics and information, and I'm happy to do that as, if it's helpful, so.
Yeah, and it could just be me getting acclimated to, information overload, but,
It's a lot.
I'll have to
You're good.
digest that.
Mhm.
And I don't know, have you sent one of those out already?
Yeah, every month, the first regular meeting
Okay.
that comes out, and it's ahead of we do the payment of vouchers first, and then the financials are after that. So what we usually do during the month of, when we're in audit season, like usually, and we don't have the budget entered officially into the system, even though we're operating in the new year, what we do is we first bring them like in August or September starting again. There's like a month or two gap in that. So, but, we're very early in the budget season at that point, so.
I think you could go back into your board book, Tony.
Yeah.
And then let's definitely find a time to connect, because I know we've wanted to, and we need to do that, so. Let's get something on the calendar, you and I, so.
Okay.
So, very, very good, well, thank you, I know the goal is not to keep these really long,
It's a lot to do, though.
But it's,
All the meetings have been running.
and I think we can definitely, especially if we draft up purchasing policy and get that set, will be good, so we have a motion and
Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion adjourned.
Second.
Second.
All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. Unanimous.
thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, guys.